Hello, Year 9. So recently we've been looking at the deforestation of tropical forests and reasons why and the consequences. So now we're going to have a look at how we can manage tropical forests sustainably, and we're going to analyse different methods and see which ones might be more successful than the others. So first of all, put today's title and date in your book, and here's a quick quiz starter. You just need to complete these sentences. You could just write the answer if you like. You will want to pause. 3, 2, 1, pause. Please pause and check your answers before you carry on any further. So, looking at this information here, I would like you to read it and make your own short notes. There's certainly no need to copy this out, and you don't need to write every single word, but you should have a short list of 5 reasons why it is important to protect the tropical forest. Pause now to do this. 3, 2, 1, pause. Now, sustainable management is something that can be applied to different biomes, and it can also be applied to the human environment as well as to the natural environment. It means using resources in such a way that we don't use them up and we don't cause any damage. Therefore, people in future generations can still meet their needs. And using resources is all about needs. So we use resources in order to build houses, in order to make energy for the things that people require. However, if we overdo it now, there won't be enough left for people who are your grandchildren, perhaps even your children, maybe even your great-grandchildren. Take a moment to read this and then write down one sentence that explains what sustainable management is. Next up, we have 12 different techniques for sustainably managing tropical forest. For each of these 12 techniques, you need to name it. You need to say whether it's international, national, or local. You need to describe the technique and think about whether you think it will work. What are the possible advantages and disadvantages that might prevent it from being a very successful technique? You will want to pause after each one of these slides so that you can get some information into your table for each of the 12 techniques. Now, whilst you're on this slide, it's a good time to pause and watch the additional clip, or you could leave the additional clip till later on if you like, but don't forget it because it's a really excellent clip. It shows the Indigenous people in the rainforest protecting the forest themselves with the use of drones. This map shows where the protected areas of the rainforest in Amazonia are. So the green bits are the areas that are protected. So you should have filled up your table with 12 techniques, a description of those techniques, and I imagine that you will have thought of some disadvantages at least, because some disadvantages are fairly obvious, but not all of them. Let's go through them, and you can add these to your table where necessary. So the International Debt Reduction Programme, it's a great idea, but not enough money is being invested in this. The amount that was given in the example, 12 point something million, although that's a lot of money for an individual, it's a tiny amount of money to a government. So I think it's a great idea. I would like to see it happen more often, but it seems to be something that needs to be done on a much larger scale. International agreements. International agreements can be very difficult to reach because you need many different governments to come together and to agree on something, and then to keep that agreement. For instance, if one president agrees to something and is then voted out and replaced with a new president of Brazil, for instance, or the United States of America, for example, then they can turn that agreement round and say that they're not going to keep with it, like President Trump did with the climate agreement, for instance. So, the National Programme of Education. It's obviously a really good idea to tell people who live in areas of rainforest what the consequences are. However, if there aren't any alternative jobs, if there's no alternative way of making a living apart from being a farmer or being a logger, it's not going to make that much difference. So I think it's a great idea, but I think it also needs a training program for jobs, and it needs to make sure that there are some jobs available. Monitoring of these areas of rainforest is obviously essential, but just imagine how difficult it must be. And thank goodness for modern technology such as the drones. If you haven't already seen the clip that's additional to this lesson, you really must. Forest reserves. We saw those green spaces on the map. I think one of the problems with the forest reserves is that they're not all joined up. Now this makes a huge problem for animals, not birds, but definitely for animals who live in the forest, because their territories are really limited by the breaks in forest. Afforestation, planting trees, obviously that's a great idea, but it's very important that the correct species of tree and other plants are used. Otherwise, they won't survive in that environment. Shifting cultivation. We saw last lesson that shifting cultivation can be sustainable, but only if it's a very small number of people doing it. The same really with rubber tapping. It can only support a small community. Selective logging, very good idea. It's also very difficult to police, because we saw, didn't we, that one of the biggest problems isn't that we don't have the protection and the laws, it's that people break the laws. So selective logging is a good idea, but unfortunately illegal loggers can make so much money from what they do that they don't always follow the rules. Horse logging, this seems like a good idea. I can't think of any particular disadvantage, although it's going to be, it's going to be a difficult thing to do, but I'm sure it's a possibility. Heli logging, though, that must be very expensive. It must be. And the helicopter is using fuel itself, so it's contributing to more greenhouse gases as well. And agroforestry, that seems like a really good idea. I can't think of any disadvantages to that. So what do you think is the technique or techniques that is most likely to work in terms of protecting the forest from further damage, further deforestation? Which one do you think and why? I'd like you to write a paragraph to answer this question. And before you do, I'd like you to remember to add detail and to explain. And now check your work, and you can do some dirt on your work, because have you included at least one international, one national and one local sustainable management technique? If not, add a little bit more. A good answer will describe those techniques, not just tell us what it is, but how it works, and then explain how that will work in order to protect the forest from further destruction. A good answer will acknowledge that even though this is a good technique which will probably work, there are some disadvantages. And a very good answer will conclude that it's probably wise to have a range of techniques, and perhaps even a range of techniques at different scales, meaning international, national and local, and that range will be the best option. So check your work, do a little bit of dirt, and then decide whether you've written a very good answer. Thank you very much for paying attention and doing all the work that you've done. I look forward to seeing you next lesson.